The elephant's actual limbs aren't very versatile. Outside of standing and walking, the most advanced move they can do is a pretty simple kick. It has multiple combat moves, including a simple bash attack.
So it's not very often that I get to rep my continent of birth on the channel, but god damn it, we're doing it today. We're talking about goddamn Africa, the continent on which the condition of living have been considered by the consensus of most anthropologists to be pretty hardcore. We're talking about a massive raid with continuous and stacking debuffs, and these are a couple of videos from the TierZoo channel. I've watched some tier list videos from there, and they're pretty damn good. And this one is, of course, on the seahorse. I wanted to say the horse of the river. That's what the hippopotamus means. And of course, the elephant, the big ass animal that tends to be motivated by vitriol because they never forget. Without further ado, let's jump into the video. Overwatch music.
This episode is sponsored by Dashlane.
God damn it.
Africa, the game's hardcore server. On top of the potentially lethal heat and disease debuffs,
True.
Many of the most powerful builds in the game are playable only on the Africa server. Everyone knows the big names. Elephants are the biggest, cheetahs are the fastest, cobras are the most venomous, etc. However, one of the builds that frequently gets overlooked is the hippopotamus.
Oh.
Even though none of their stats are the best in a single category, there are things that they do better than anything else. So today I'm going to give an overview of the hippopotamus's stats and abilities, talk about its good and bad matchups, and where I'd rate it in the overall tier list. I've already done one video that sort of touches on all these things, but since it was one of the first videos I ever made, it's pretty lacking in quality. So hopefully this guide will do a better job doing the topic justice.
I think that the hippos are the equivalent of what every powerlifter would like to identify as. Like, they do sleep, right? And they do sweat a lot. But once they engage in their lifts, they keep on going. And the rest of that set comes a lot later. And also, they are primarily made of pure brawn. It's muscle. They may be chunky, but that is pure meat.
Anyways, without further ado, let's get into it. Hippos are the premier tank build of the African aquatic meta. Their success comes from a combination of phenomenal stats and from speccing into abilities that allow for some pretty ingenious exploitation of the game's water physics, which I'll get into in a bit. But first, their stats. So you probably noticed that the Hippo stats are, in a word, phenomenal. They have one of the highest HP levels of any land build, second only to the elephant. Normally, builds with one unusually high base stat tend to have major shortcomings in other areas, but the Hippo simply doesn't. While its intelligence is only average, all the rest of their stats far outclass most other African builds. They have great damage, high defense, and even have great stealth for a build in such a high weight class. But perhaps the most surprising is their mobility level, which relates to how their abilities let them engage in physics engine exploits like I mentioned earlier.
Yeah,
so
that's
in addition
nuts.
to having relatively high run speed on land, hippos are also unbelievably mobile in the water. Now, normally,
How fast is they can run again? Is this 50 kilometers per hour, I think, the top speed?
Few moments later.
Okay, I give them way too much credit. It's 30, but still, it's like a slow bicycle.
when designing your character to be fast in the water, you spec into traits like, water mobility. Things like a streamlined body, fins, flukes, webbed feet, all these things strictly buff water speed, and usually are the go-to for players trying to take their character to new depths in the aquatic meta.
But nope.
The Hippo player base decided to do exactly none of that,
Dense as
instead dumping
fuck.
most of their evolution points into pure bulk and muscle. As a result, hippos are so dense that, unlike most animals, they do not float. This lets them be one of the only builds that can actually use the run movement option underwater with any success. So yeah, hippos, despite not actually being able to swim, have one of the best aquatic movement options in the game, and they didn't
Yikes.
even have to spend any evolution points on aquatic mobility to do so. So, hippos have 4 signature abilities, the first being their water dash ability that I just explained. Their second ability is their 2-inch thick skin. This ability is the reason behind their high defense level, and it grants them some of the best resistances in the game, particularly to the common threats in the African server. It grants them near total immunity to slash and bite type damage, since claws and teeth simply are too short to pierce their skin. This lets them shrug off the vast majority of standard attacks in the African meta, and is also crucial for letting them survive attacks even from groups of enemies, which is...
Oh, an entire lion pride just using the entire force there. You guys hear something? Goddamn hippopotami are genius.
Is normally the answer to defeating a high HP target. Defending from physical attacks is important, but it's just as critical to make sure your elemental resistances are adequate too. Because hippos
sun.
have spec'd into the hairless trait in order to minimize mobility debuffs in the water, they're highly vulnerable to solar damage. In order to mitigate this issue, hippos have spec'd into sweat that grants them UV resistance and, as an added bonus,
it's the one that
grants
turned
them
them
resistance to
red.
infection, another hugely beneficial trait to have when you spend most of your time in unclean water, potentially with open wounds.
Yeah.
The only downside is that while active, it gives the hippo players a reddish tint, temporarily lowering their stealth level. Their last special trait is their tusks. Hippos haven't spec'd into carnivory or even omnivory.
Oh. That may just be a little incorrect, if I'm not wrong, but the first thing that I wanted to point out was the spinning tail there, because if you've ever seen one up close, yeah, they do the helicopter poopy thing. It's disgusting. But hippopotami also have this thing where they can default to becoming omnivores and even eating their own if the resources are scarce. So they can do that too.
Special trait is their tusks. Hippos haven't spec'd into carnivory or even omnivory. They're strictly herbivorous and can't gain any XP from meat. However, regardless of this fact, they have one of the most damaging bites in the game.
Yeah.
On top of the sheer force of the bite itself, which is around a ton by the way, their tusks deal massive damage to anything they puncture.
Look at that.
But on top of the hippo's damage potential, their tusks offer another important benefit, intimidation. So the most effective intimidation techniques are the ones that can be quickly switched on and off.
Is that the next L'Oreal model? Because it's worth it. That smile. That goddamn smile.
A coral snake's colors are always bright, and a spider is always creepy, but hippos aren't always terrifying.
No.
In fact, most of the time they appear non-threatening, yet in an instant they can crank up the intimidation to 100 just by opening their mouths. A hippo player with intimidation active is one of the most intimidating things in the entire game, easily being able to scare off even some of the bulkiest builds like rhinos. Okay, so for matchups, hippos sport one of the most comfortable matchup spreads possible. Because they're highly resistant to bite and slash attacks, most of the relevant predator matchups, such as crocodiles, lions, hyenas, and painted dogs, are highly favorable for the hippo.
Oh, can we talk about a painted dog for a moment? Or the African wild dog? They have about a raid rating of like 90%. They hunt with trust. They are highly successful at what they do because they trust one another, and they're also so fucking cute. Look at those freaking round ears that they have. Oh, I love them.
On top of this, the hippo's own attacks can one-shot any of those predators. As for bad matchups, any builds that focus on stab-type weaponry can definitely give a hippo a hard time. In particular, elephants and rhinos both have long enough horns or tusks to pierce the hippo's thick skin and deal critical damage to if they're foolish enough to challenge them.
Ooh.
Fortunately, the rhino's low intelligence makes it highly susceptible to intimidate abilities, so that matchup is by no means unwinnable.
It's also like half
Elephants,
blind.
though, they'll walk straight through a group of hippo players, knowing none of them will challenge it. Also, ironically, one of the worst matchups for a hippo is
Their own?
another hippo,
Yeah.
since a hippo's tusks do have the potential to pierce their defenses.
Ugh.
The last important matchup to discuss for them is how they fare against humans, and in this regard, they've got one of the best records of all. Obviously, they still lose to the highly advanced equipment that humans have recently unlocked, but aside from that, humans don't have any way to combat them. As a result, hippos have the highest KD ratio versus humans in the entire game. Even special high-level mounts, like boats and trucks, can be taken down by a hippo. So where do hippos belong on the tier list? Well, considering how they're basically unstoppable tanks that manage to spec into an excellent semi-aquatic playstyle without sacrificing any land-based abilities to do so, it's tough to argue that they're anything but S tier. They easily control any rivers or lakes that they're in, being even more dominant than crocodiles. In fact, while currently the vast majority of the hippo player base is
I am right here. And the hippo population of Cameroon is actually declining extremely fast. Because a lot of companies have started, well, not started. They've been doing it for quite some time, but they ramped up the antic by mining a lot of gold in the areas where they are located. So they've been poisoning the waters where the hippos would live. So that's messed up. Yeah, I guess that the second predator to the hippos will be us.
In the African server, a few of them have recently broken into the South American meta. Now, hippos have one of the lower spawn rates in the game, so it'll be a while before we can really assess their viability in servers outside of Africa, but I would bet that eventually hippos will be one of the most dominant builds in South America too,
Holy
especially
shit.
since they have great matchups against the top tiers there too, like the Cayman and the Jaguar. The Piranha player base might give them a hard time though, so we'll have to wait and see. Their thick hide offers a lot of protection, but with hundreds of bites chipping it away, even the hippo might struggle.
Yeah.
Protecting your hit points is critical to survival in the current meta, but perhaps equally important is protecting your passwords, and that's where today's sponsor
Dashlane.
comes
Yeah.
in. My favorite feature of Dashlane is how it autofills every online login form on every website, as well as autofilling payments for online checkouts. It does this across all of my devices, so I never have trouble logging in, even though I use passwords.
Buddy, did you just... I suppose that those were default numbers. I hope they were. But yeah, as expected, the hippos are ranked at S tier because they deserve it. Now to the elephant. I suppose the elephant would be ranked at the same position as well, but we'll see.
This video was made in partnership with CuriosityStream.
Aww.
Being the largest land build in the current meta has its advantages. Size makes you much harder to defeat, simply by nature of having a higher HP stat, and also possibly having your weak points out of reach. However, size alone typically isn't enough to let any particular build reach a high tier spot in the meta, because large size comes with a lot of disadvantages too. The two most important ones are that being a giant makes defeating you worth a lot more experience, and that sustaining giant size requires significantly more food and water. Despite these challenges, there's no question that elephants have carved out a dominant niche in the African meta, which is saying a lot given that Africa is basically the Grandmaster League server of outside. Elephants also boast a sizable player base in the Asia server, so how is it that they're so successful? For that, we'll need to look at the elephant build's stats and abilities. First, their stats. So it's probably no surprise that the elephant's HP and defense stats both are quite high. The massive size of the elephant means it can take hits that would cripple or kill other players, such as the head bash of a fellow elephant. But the elephant also boasts a thick hide that allows it to negate damage of low power attacks.
That's a baby.
And more importantly, mitigate one of the main downsides of being massive, becoming riddled with parasites. On the offensive side of things, it's probably also no surprise that the elephant boasts a multitude of ways to deal serious damage. Their front-facing tusks
Can we just pay our respect to the rhinos? Not respect, I would want to say our eulogy to the rhinos. Those poor creatures, the real-life unicorns, just keep on catching L's upon L's. How sad.
act as a powerful disjointed hitbox that can both parry incoming attacks and impale any player too slow to get out of the way. The elephant build is also one of the only builds in the game capable of knocking down trees.
Yeah.
This means that despite them not having the height advantage that giraffes do, they can still access the same treetop loot if they need to. It also means players cannot escape an elephant's attack by climbing up a tree. The elephant's trunk can also be used as a blunt force weapon or a grapple, but honestly that only scratches the surface of what a trunk is useful for.
I have zero empathy for people who go and play with an elephant's trunk like that and get smacked. It's deserved. I mean, goddamn, leave the animal alone. It's like it's a part of its body.
We'll come back to that. In the mobility department, we find one of the elephant's only weaknesses. Their top speed is nowhere near sufficient to let them outrun an attacking player or chase down a target.
No.
Luckily, their other stats generally mean that they don't have to worry about this. However, low mobility has other implications too. Elephants are easily blocked by environmental barriers because they lack the ability to jump.
Yeah.
They aren't particularly fast swimmers either, although they have ways of managing this weakness too. Their last notable stat is their incredible intelligence level. It is among the highest in the game, tied for second place with the cetaceans like dolphins and whales. This gives them access to the tool use ability, problem-solving capabilities, cross-species cooperation-based strategies,
Oh.
and the ability to remember places on the minimap useful for survival,
Yep.
such as watering holes in times of drought. Due to the elephant's long lifespan, their intellect can cause them to gain incredible amounts of wisdom over the course of their playthrough, to the point where an experienced elephant may have better knowledge of its territory than even a human. So in terms of stats, elephants obviously have one of the highest base stat totals in the game, lacking only in mobility and stealth. But this alone would not be enough for me to give them a top tier rating.
No.
So what abilities do they employ to make use of their stats and dominate such a competitive meta? There are two that I want to discuss. First, their ears. The elephant's ears serve multiple purposes. They're more sensitive than human ears to sound, particularly low-frequency sounds,
Yeah.
aka the kinds of sounds elephants can make. Because of that, elephants can communicate
Their
over
own
great
pack.
distances via infrasound. This can be critical for coordinating team strategies and warning your teammates when danger approaches, or if another herd is encroaching on your territory. In addition to their auditory uses, the elephant's ears also grant the elephant a heat resistance buff. Their ears can be flushed with blood and flapped around to lower their body temperature, ensuring that they never take damage from overheating. This buff is much more integral to gameplay in the African server, and so players tend to spec into larger
Asia,
ears when trying to compete there. That's a good ability, but I'm going to cut to the chase. Basically, everything OP about the elephant can be traced back to their signature ability, their trunk,
Throw.
because this ability does everything. Because it's a modified nose, the trunk grants a bonus to all detection and search rolls based on smell. This lets elephant players pinpoint which direction they need to head in order to find more food or water, and lets them know if an enemy player is nearby.
Oh
smell
my
barely scratches the
god.
surface.
Can you imagine being such a massive animal to have to cross the desert? Like, I get it with towards body of water, that makes sense. The trunk and all. But yikes.
Surface of what a trunk can do. The trunk's core use is as a fifth appendage. The elephant's actual limbs aren't very versatile. Outside of standing and walking, the most advanced move they can do is a pretty simple kick. It has multiple combat moves, including a simple bash attack, and more importantly, a highly effective grab attack.
Yeah.
The bash attack is honestly worse than a kick in terms of damage, although it does have better range. But the grab attack can make certain matchups downright unwinnable for the other player. Grabs aren't just useful for attacks though. Being able to pick up and carry items is the hallmark of a high-tier character that can make use of tools.
Yeah, boosting the
Elephants are known
range.
to use sticks as weapons, massively extending the hitbox of their trunk swipe attack. They can also throw items, which theoretically could give them an absolutely massive attack.
Accuracy sucks.
They aren't very accurate with their throws yet, but once the elephant player base masters this tech, I wouldn't be surprised if the community starts calling for bans. But again, there's still more that the trunk can do. The next use it can have is for intimidation. Elephants can use their trunk to execute the move Trumpet Blast. This AoE attack casts
Demoralizing shout.
all surrounding players, and is extremely effective for clearing an area.
Yeah.
Control over a watering hole can mean the difference between leveling up or getting a game over, and the Trumpet Blast attack is integral to the elephant's success in driving away other players from these control points, without actually needing to risk a physical battle. Lastly, I mentioned before that elephants are slow swimmers. Normally this would be a problem because it means elephants would have trouble crossing large bodies of water. They aren't dense enough to sink to the bottom and gallop across like hippos do. However, even though it might take them a while to cross, elephants have no reason to fear drowning, because they can use their trunk like a snorkel, completely negating the need to worry about their O2 meter draining.
Yeah.
Aside from humans, elephants have no losing matchups. While they are vulnerable during the first few levels of their playthrough, before they are bulky enough to shrug off most attacks, the elephant's team strategies are usually enough to protect the noobs. Hopefully this video convinced you how overpowered elephants, and particularly the trunk ability, are.
Actually, there's also the little stat boost that they get once they, during the mating season. Because, at least for the male, they get an extreme testosterone boost, which makes them a lot more aggressive and prone to do a lot more damage.
By the way, you may have noticed that my last video actually got blocked.
Oh.
While I hope to have the video restored soon, you should know that the blocked video as well as another completely original video are both available on Nebula, the video streaming service created and owned by several independent creators, including myself. It's a platform where creators can post whatever content they like without having to worry about rogue algorithms issuing copyright claims,
Oh, that's
or
nice.
YouTube's demonetization policies. And because of our business partner, CuriosityStream, us creators are given opportunities to pursue much grander projects with a higher production value. Both of the the videos I've currently got only on Nebula are exactly that. Both of those videos feature footage from CuriosityStream's documentary Amazing Dino World, a brand new CuriosityStream original that's easily on par with Walking with Dinosaurs in production quality. And you can get access to their documentary and my Nebula originals at the same time, because the best way to get access to Nebula is through our bundle with CuriosityStream, which gives you access to both amazing streaming sites. And hey, if you just want to learn more about pachyderm builds, there are plenty of other documentaries on CuriosityStream you can watch too.
Oh man, how far have they come? The goddamn mammoth. Will we ever get a mammoth back? Like, I know that last year there was a baby woolly mammoth that was found that was like 30,000 years old in some permafrost, and it just looks so fucking sad. Yeah, I don't know. We might get them one day.
Such as Ice Age Giants and Walking with Beasts, both of which have entire episodes centered around mammoths and mastodons, the pioneers of the pachyderm build. So head on over to curiositystream.com/TierZoo and start your free trial of both services.
But yeah, elephants and hippos truly are built different. But as always, thank you for checking out this video, and please do go and subscribe to the TierZoo channel. And that's it though, wish you all to have a wonderful day, and see you guys in the next one. Bye.
My niggas are savage, ruthless. We got 30 and 100 rounds too. Records on records, got backers on backers, I'm riding around in a coupe.